Hey Planeswalkers, this is Eric again from Bane Alley Magic, bringing you another Commander deck tech video. And today we're talking about a partner commander pairing, Akroma, Vision of Ixidor, and Kamahl, Heart of Krosa. So Akroma is 5 and 2 white for a 6/6 angel with flying, first strike, vigilance, and trample. And at the beginning of each combat until end of turn, each other creature you control gets +1/+1 if it has flying, +1/+1 if it has first strike, and so on for double strike, death touch, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, protection, reach, trample, vigilance, and partner. Kamahl, Heart of Krosa, is 6 and 2 green for a 5/5 human druid. At the beginning of combat on your turn, creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. And for 1 and a green, until end of turn, target land you control becomes a 1/1 elemental creature with vigilance, indestructible, and haste. It is still a land. So these two all by themselves kind of play off of each other really well. Kamahl gives all of your creatures trample, so Akroma is going to be pumping them up. Kamahl also makes creatures with 3 different keyword abilities. And what I really like about both of these creatures is they both have the ability to pump up our entire team. And in my mind, the best way to utilize this pumping effect is to go wide, to go with creature tokens. So I am playing a token-themed deck, which means we are playing spells that create creature tokens, and we are actually gaining what I call a board advantage. As opposed to card advantage, board advantage is when you're only spending 1 card to get multiple permanents, right? So the theme of this deck is to make tokens. Just an army of tokens and overwhelm our opponent. And if you just look at this right here, it already looks insane, right? If you have a board state like this, it is extremely difficult for your opponents to block and for them to attack you, because you usually have plenty of creatures left over to block as well. And so yeah, you just overwhelm your opponents. You have so many creatures that sure, they can block a couple here and there, but overall most of them are going to get through. Another great thing about the token decks is they don't care when someone board wipes, because they can rebuild themselves so easily. Like, someone board wipes your army of tokens, 2 turns later you have an entire new army of tokens. It's a great strategy, and green and white are the perfect colors for it. And also, like I said, just the ability to pump up all of your tokens is very game ending, and so that's why I have Kamahl and Akroma leading this deck. Now, I am not building this deck in the way that lots of people are building Akroma, which we call keyword soup, where you include creatures that just all have a lot of abilities, because that's really more going tall. You know, you're just getting a bunch of big creatures, and I think that's a lot easier for your opponents to deal with. And so almost all of my tokens in the deck do have keyword abilities, but they're not like stuffed with keyword abilities like other non-token creatures would be. But I think it's fine. Like, just the ability to pump our tokens, even just +1 or +2, is game ending all in itself. And Kamahl pumps them +3/+3. Now, if you are playing any sort of token-based deck and you don't own the tokens, shame on you.
You dumb bastard.
Take a little bit of time and just build an extra deck box just for your tokens. It is not hard at all to remember to bring your tokens to every single game. When you're using dice to represent your tokens, things get really crazy and it just doesn't work. So if you're going to be a true token deck player, you need to have your tokens. And if you don't have tokens for everything, you can make your own tokens really easily. Just print them on regular paper and then put them in a plastic sleeve on top of a basic land, and there you go. You have your creature tokens. So let's look at the numbers real quick. So the total creatures in the deck, including our commanders, is 23. Cards that make creature tokens, including creatures, is 30. So we have 30 different cards in the deck that make tokens. 14 ramp spells, 11 spells that give us card advantage, 9 removal spells, a little low because we're the token deck, and you know, we are less concerned about our opponents attacking us than other decks are, because we have plenty of blockers, so we have a little less removal than normal, and 35 lands. So a couple things before we get into the deck. First off, as usual, I'm not considering budget when I'm building this deck. This is a high-powered deck, but it is not EDH. You know, I'm not including Monocrypt and Monovault and that kind of stuff. But it is a high-powered deck, so I am not excluding cards because they are expensive. The last thing I want to say is, if you enjoy this video, please hit that like button. I don't make any money for doing this, but seeing that people like my videos is a great inspiration for me to just keep making more. If you have a moment, hit that like button. It doesn't mean you're going to be getting notifications from me or emails or anything. It just means you're giving me a little bit of inspiration. It helps out a lot. Alright, so let's get into the deck, starting with our creatures and our creature token making spells. Let's put them all together. So Hangerback Walker is XX for a 0 construct. It enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, and when it dies, you put a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying onto the battlefield for each +1/+1 counter on it. And you can pay 1 and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on. So you just dump as much mana as you can into this. You get a pretty decent sized creature. You can slowly make it bigger, and eventually it can give you a bunch of creature tokens. Next is Legion's Landing, 1 white for a legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, make a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink, and when you attack with 3 or more creatures, you transform it into Adonto the First Fort, which taps for white, or you can pay 2 and a white and tap it to create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So this is sort of like ramp because it eventually turns into a land. It gives us creature tokens, and those tokens have lifelink, so they get bigger with Akroma. Quick side note, if you are going to make your own creature tokens, if anything, make them for Legion's Landing, because those 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink just look really silly. The artwork is bad, very bad. Next is Secure the Wastes, X and a white for an instant. Put X 1/1 white warrior creature tokens onto the battlefield. So what's really great about Secure the Wastes is its instant speed. You can do it at the end step of your opponent right before your own turn, and then you can attack with all of those creatures right away. And that it can actually end the game all by itself if you already have several anthems or things that can pump your creatures on the battlefield. Then you follow it up with an instant speed Secure the Waste, and it's game over. Next is Tangled Florahedron. 1 and a green for a 1/1 elemental that taps for green, or you can choose to have it enter as a tapped land. So I love this card because it's whichever one you want. You either want ramp or you want a land for the turn. Either way. Next is Crashing Footfalls, a sorcery with no mana cost, but it has Suspend 4 for 1 green. So rather than cast the spell from your hand, you pay 1 green and exile it with 4 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter, and when the last is removed, you cast it without paying its mana cost. And you create 2 4/4 green rhino creature tokens with trample for just 1 mana. Pretty good deal. Next is Luminarch Ascension, 1 and a white for an enchantment. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if you didn't lose life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Luminarch Ascension. And for 1 and a white, you create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. Activate this ability only if Luminarch Ascension has 4 or more quest counters on it. So Luminarch Ascension is a card that can actually win you the game all by itself. If your opponents don't deal with it, if they don't get rid of it, this will create you an entire angel army. Fabulous. Next is Brimaz, King of Oreskos, 1 and 2 white for a 3/4 cat soldier with vigilance, and whenever Brimaz, King of Oreskos attacks, put a 1/1 white cat soldier creature token with vigilance onto the battlefield attack. And whenever Brimaz blocks a creature, put a 1/1 white cat soldier creature token with vigilance onto the battlefield, blocking that creature. So for just 3 mana, having a 3/4 that makes more and more creature tokens is a really great deal, and I'm surprised I actually haven't seen more people just playing this card in general. Very good token maker. Next we have Arachnogenesis, 2 and a green for an instant. You put X 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach onto the battlefield, where X is the number of creatures attacking you. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by non-spider creatures. So this is the ultimate fog of all time, just preventing all combat damage that would be dealt to you and to creatures you control. And now you can use this new army of 1/2 spiders to kill your opponent's attacking creatures without having the risk of any of those spiders taking damage. It's just awesome. Next is Awakening Zone, 2 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token. It has sacrifice this creature to add a colorless mana to your mana pool. Getting a guaranteed creature every single turn is really powerful. What's even more powerful is the ability to sacrifice those creatures for mana. From Beyond is very similar. It's 3 and a green. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token onto the battlefield that you can sacrifice to add colorless mana to your mana pool. And you can pay 1 and a green and sacrifice From Beyond to search for an Eldrazi card that doesn't have any reference in this deck at all. But Again, the ability to get a 1/1 every single turn is excellent, and we can sacrifice those for mana. Next is Oquetra the True, 3 and a white for a 3/6 legendary god with double strike and indestructible. She can't attack or block unless you control at least 3 other creatures. Not hard to do at all in a token deck, and she makes tokens herself. For 3 and a white, you create a 1/1 warrior creature token with vigilance. Next is Heliod, God of the Sun, 3 and a white for a 5/6 indestructible god. It's not a creature unless your devotion to white is 5 or more. Other creatures you control all get vigilance, and for 2 and 2 white, you put a 2/1 white cleric enchantment creature token onto the battlefield. So Heliod not only pumps out more creatures, but it also gives all of our creatures an extra keyword ability, which pumps them up one more time with Akroma. Next is Battle Screech, 2 and 2 white for a sorcery. You create 2 1/1 white bird creature tokens with flying, and it has flashback for just tapping 3 untapped white creatures you control. So those untapped white creatures can have summoning sickness as well, and you can still tap them to flashback Battle Screech. So this is essentially 4 flying creature tokens for 4 mana. That's an excellent deal. Next is Leonin Warleader, 2 and 2 white for a 4/4 cat soldier. Whenever it attacks, you create 2 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink that are tapped and attacking. And they don't have to be attacking the same player or planeswalker that Leonin Warleader is attacking. This is just another great way to pump out more tokens with keyword abilities. Next is Hero of Bladehold, 2 and 2 white for a 3/4 human knight with Battle Cry. So whenever this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And whenever she attacks, you put 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. So both of these abilities actually go on the stack at the exact same time, so you can stack them in any way you want. So what you want to do is put the Battle Cry trigger on the stack first, so that the next ability resolves first, and that way you can pump up the tokens that you've just made with the Battle Cry trigger. So this is another great way to pump up all of your board and make more creature tokens. Next is Mangara the Diplomat, 3 and a white for a 2/4 human cleric with lifelink. Whenever an opponent attacks you or a planeswalker you control with 2 or more creatures, you get to draw a card, and whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you also get to draw a card. It's just a nice way to draw cards in white. Next we have Arasta of the Endless Web, 2 and 2 green for a 3/5 spider with reach, and whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach. Next is Keeper of Fables, 3 and 2 green for a 4/5 cat. Whenever 1 or more non-human creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So in a token deck, we have tons of non-human creatures. Technically, even our soldiers and our knight creature tokens are not humans. I think just a few creatures like Kamahl and Mangara might be the only humans in the deck. Next is Aran Frostfang, 3 and 2 green for a 2/6 snake. Attacking creatures you control have Death Touch, and whenever any creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. That is just awesome. Giving everything Death Touch is so hard for your opponents to deal with. Next is Militant Angel, 3 and 2 white for a 3/4 angel with flying and lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, create a number of 2/2 white knight creature tokens with vigilance equal to the number of opponents you attacked this turn. So for just 5 mana, let's see, you'd be getting 9 power on the battlefield. Excellent. Spread amongst 4 bodies. Not bad at all, just as long as you've attacked all of your opponents that turn, of course. And again, that's not hard to do when you have a ton of creature tokens. Next is Wingmate Rock, 3 and 2 white for a 3/4 bird with flying, and it has Rage, so when it enters the battlefield, if you attacked with a creature this turn, you get another 3/4 white bird with flying. And whenever Wingmate Rock attacks, you gain 1 life for each attacking creature. So not only does this give you 2 big bodies on the battlefield that both have flying, it also gains you a ton of life. Next is Belfry Spirit, 3 and 2 white for a 1/1 spirit with Haunt. So when this creature dies, you exile it, haunting target creature. And it's not non-token creatures, so this can haunt one of your tokens. And when it enters the battlefield, or the creature it haunts dies, create 2 1/1 black bat creature tokens with flying. So this is, again, 5 creatures, all with flying for 5 mana. Not all at once, unfortunately, but 3 of them right away and 2 more later. Next is Tristani Discordant, 3, a green and a white for a 1/4 Dryad. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. Whenever she enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink, and at the beginning of your end step, each player gains control of all creatures they own. So she makes creature tokens, she pumps all your creatures, and she protects us from having Akroma or Kamahl being stolen from other players. Next is Requiem Angel, 5 and a white for a 5/5 angel with flying. Whenever another non-spirit creature you control dies, put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield. Notice that it doesn't say non-token, it's just anything that's not a spirit. When it dies, you get a 1/1 spirit, so even your creature tokens that die are replaced with 1/1 spirits. When you have Parallel Lives out or Anointed Procession, this just gets stupid. Like, all of your creatures, when they die, they make 2 1/1 white creature tokens with flying. That's just very game-ending. Next is Silverwing Squadron, 5 and a white for a star human knight with flying and vigilance. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control, and whenever it attacks, create a number of 2/2 white knight creature tokens with vigilance equal to the number of opponents you have. So you can just be attacking one opponent, and you're still going to be making 3 2/2 white knight creature tokens with vigilance. This card just seems like it's insane. Even for 6 mana, this is potentially a humongous creature with flying and vigilance that makes up to 3 creature tokens every single turn. Yeah, excellent. Next is Realm Seekers, 4 and 2 green for a 0/0 Elf Scout. It enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on it, where X is the total number of cards in all players' hands. And for 2 and a green, remove a +1/+1 counter from it and search your library for a land card and put it into your hand. So Realm Seekers, man, when I play this, all the time it's like a 20/20, just out of nowhere. And that's very surprising for your opponents to see in a token deck. So I just like that we have at least one really big creature in the deck, and Kamahl can give it trample, and it can also ramp us. Next is Elspeths Champion, 4 and 2 white for a planeswalker that enters with 4 loyalty counters. For +1, you put 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield. -3, destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater, and -7, you get an emblem with creatures you control get +2/+2 and have flying. So putting 3 creature tokens onto the battlefield is really powerful. Even if they don't have keyword abilities, it doesn't matter. They're still totally worth it just to get 3 new creatures every single turn. The -3 ability is a great board wipe, and -7, if you can get there, is a fabulous emblem. Next is Captain of the Watch, 4 and 2 white for a 3/3 human soldier with vigilance. Other soldiers you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance, and when Captain of the Watch enters the battlefield, put 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield. So Captain of the Watch is also kind of insane, because it gives you 3 2/2s actually that all have vigilance, 9 power for 6 mana, and it's all vigilance, spread across 4 bodies. Next is Wurmcoil Engine, 6 mana for a 6/6 artifact creature worm with Death Touch and Lifelink, and when it dies, you make a 3/3 worm artifact creature token with Death Touch and a 3/3 worm artifact creature token with Lifelink, and it's just great that all of these have keyword abilities that let them get pumped up with Akroma. Next is Hornet Queen, 4 and 3 green for a 2/2 insect with flying and Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, create 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and Death Touch. 4! So this is a total of 5 bodies that all have 2 keyword abilities, so all of these are going to be getting +2/+2 with Akroma. So that is 16 attacking power if you have both Akroma, Hornet Queen, and all those tokens out. That is insane. Next is Gideon's Phalanx, 5 and 2 white for an instant. Put 4 2/2 white knight creature tokens with vigilance onto the battlefield, and if you have 2 or more instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard, creatures you control also gain indestructible until end of turn. So I love that this spell is instant speed. You know, when you have an instant speed spell, it's just always better, so you can really easily get a 2-for-1 off of this if someone does happen to board wipe. And even if not, hey, you're still getting 4 2/2s that can all basically attack right away, because you're casting this at the last possible moment to make sure that you're going to still have them on the battlefield when it's your turn. Next is Finale of Glory, X and 2 white for a sorcery. You create X 2/2 white soldier creature tokens with vigilance, and if X is 10 or more, also create X 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance. So all by itself, if you can dump 10 mana into X, you're going to get 60 power on the battlefield, all with vigilance, and 2/3 of it with flying. Finale of Glory, I love this card. I mean, it's not like a broken card by any means, but if you have a ton of mana, it is one of the most hilarious and awesome ways you can win any game. You just make literally an entire army with one card. This card, for me, is the ultimate board advantage card of the entire deck, of the entire game. Definitely one of my favorite token making cards, can win the game all by itself. Next is March of the Multitudes. X, a green and 2 white for an instant, and it has Convoke, so your creatures can help you cast this spell. Each creature you tap while casting this spell pays for 1 colorless or for 1 mana of that creature's color, and you create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink. So March of the Multitudes, just, oh man, it has the potential to make so many creature tokens, just depending on how many creatures you already have on the battlefield. And again, it doesn't matter if they have summoning sickness, you can tap summoning sick creatures to help you pay for that Convoke cost. So March of the Multitudes, just another way you can end the game all in one card. Next we have Emiria's Call, 4 and 3 white for a sorcery. You create 2 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying. Non-angel creatures you control gain indestructible until your next turn. And you also have the option of playing this as a land that enters the battlefield tapped unless you pay 3 life. So this is just one of those cards that it's just like, why not put it in any white deck, especially a deck that's based around creature tokens, because you always have the option of playing this as a land, and having that flexibility can put you ahead of the game. Anointed Procession, 3 and a white for an enchantment. If an effect would create 1 or more creature tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. Parallel Lives, basically the exact same thing. And then we have Divine Visitation, which doesn't actually double our tokens, but it makes all of them more powerful. And I actually kind of believe that this is almost more powerful than the other two. Divine Visitation, 3 and 2 white for an enchantment. If 1 or more creature tokens would be created under your control, that many 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance are created instead. So if you'd make 3 1/1s, you know, you're instead going to make 3 4/4s with flying and vigilance. It's just very insane when you have Divine Visitation out in any token deck, especially if you can get, you know, 2 of these out at the same time. Any 2 at the same time is very game ending. Next, I got a couple ways to protect our creatures. We have Teferi's Protection, 2 and a white for an instant. Until your next turn, your life total can't change, and you have protection from everything, and all permanents you control phase out. So while they're phased out, they're treated as though they don't exist, even though they still do exist, and they phase in before you untap during your untap step, and then you have to exile Teferi's Protection. So with phasing, you do get your creature tokens back, and that's awesome. Next is Eldrazi Monument, 5 mana for an artifact. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and have flying and indestructible. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. If you can't, sacrifice Eldrazi Monument. This goes in literally every single token deck I have ever made, absolutely. You always have a creature that you can sacrifice, and giving all of your creatures +1/+1 flying and indestructible is game ending. Next is Triumph of the Hordes, 2 and 2 green for a sorcery. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1, gain trample, and infect. Yeah, I win the game. Next, we got our ramp. So, of course, we gotta have Soul Ring. Next is Burgeoning, 1 green for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent plays a land, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. This is an expensive card. These 3 enchantments on the screen are all expensive cards, but, you know, our commanders are really expensive to cast. We got to have some good ramp in the deck to make sure we can get our commanders out quickly and efficiently. So Burgeoning, it does require that you have lands in your hand, but man, this can ramp you so quickly. Just 1 turn around the table and you suddenly have 4 lands on the battlefield. Insane. Next is Exploration, 1 green for an enchantment. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. And then we got Land Tax, 1 white for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you may search your library for up to 3 basic land cards, reveal them, put them into your hand and shuffle your library. So land tax is a great way to make sure that we always have lands in our hand to be putting onto the battlefield with burgeoning and exploration. But even all by itself, it's just a guarantee that we're always going to be hitting our land drops every single turn. And whenever I have the opportunity, I do always search out 3 basics out of my deck, even if it means I'm going to be discarding them, because it's just thinning my deck, and that's lowering the chances that the next card I draw is going to be a land. Next is Pearl Medallion, 2 mana for an artifact. White spells you cast are 1 less to cast, every single white spell, so this can net you a ton of extra mana over the course of 1 turn. Emerald Medallion, 2 mana for an artifact. Green spells you cast are 1 less to cast. Next is Harvest Season, 2 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control, and put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So the only limit is how many creatures you can make and attack with. Next is Kodama's Reach, 2 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, and put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So this not only ramps you, but if you also happen to have missed your land drop for turn, you get that land as well. Cultivate is the exact same thing. Next we have Mirari's Wake, 3, a green and a white for an enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. Mirari's Wake is another expensive card that is just too good to pass up. Alright, next we got some card draw spells. Keen Sense is 1 green for an aura with enchant creature. Whenever enchanted creature deals combat damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. This is not a fabulous card draw spell, but I'm including it in the deck because it's only 1 mana. And if we just happen to have some flying creature that we know can get through with damage, this is great. This is going to be drawing us extra cards. If we can draw just 1 extra card off of this, it's worth it, I think. Next is Culling Dais, 2 mana for an artifact that you can tap to sacrifice a creature and put a charge counter on it, or you can pay 1 mana and sacrifice it to draw a card for each charge counter that's on it. This is a great card draw spell, in my opinion. In Commander, it is always great to have a sacrifice outlet, just in case someone's trying to enchant your commander or gain control of your commander. You can always respond by sacrificing it with Culling Dais. And over the course of the game, if you just sacrifice 2 or 3 creatures with this, that's drawing 2 or 3 cards for just 3 mana. That is fabulous. Next is Fecundity, 2 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever any creature dies, that creature's controller may draw a card. And guess what? We're always going to have more creatures than anyone else, and so we're always going to be drawing more cards than anyone else with Fecundity. Great in any token deck. Next is Harmonize, 2 and 2 green, draw 3 cards. Great. Next is Fruit of the First Tree, 3 and a green for enchantment aura. When enchanted creature dies, you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is its toughness. So this can go on one of our commanders to make sure we're drawing a bunch of cards, or we can even put it on one of our opponent's big creatures to draw cards off of them and gain life. Next is Shamanic Revelation, 3 and 2 green. You draw a card for each creature you control. And you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. And both of our commanders have high power, and yeah, just in any token deck, this is essential. Drawing a card for each creature you control. That's a lot of cards. Next is Camaraderie, 4, a green and a white for a sorcery. You gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of creatures you control, and creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, so it also pumps all of your creatures. Next is Collective Unconscious, 4 and 2 green for a sorcery, draw a card for each creature you control. Alright, then we got some removal. Reciprocate is 1 white for an instant, exile target creature that dealt damage to you this turn. So you do have to take the damage, but it is only 1 white to exile a threat. Next is Swords to Plowshares, 1 white for an instant, exile target creature, its controller gains life equal to its power. So it's definitely worth it to get rid of the worst creature, even if their controller is gaining a little bit of life. Next is Declaration in Stone, 1 and a white for a sorcery, exile target creature, and all other creatures its controller controls with the same name as that creature. That player investigates for each non-token creature exiled this way. So if someone is also playing a token deck, you can get rid of all of their worst tokens. And I put this in the deck over Path to Exile because I feel like allowing them to draw 1 card is better than actually ramping them. Next is Hour of Reckoning, 4 and 3 white for a sorcery with Convoke. and you destroy all non-token creatures. So basically like a one-sided board wipe. All of your tokens survive, non-tokens get out of here. Next is Austere Command, 4 and 2 white for a sorcery. You choose 2. Either destroy all artifacts, enchantments, creatures CMC 3 or less, or creatures CMC 4 or greater. You get to choose any 2 you want, and of course all of your creature tokens are CMC 0. Next is Uzuri's Predation, 5 and 3 green for a sorcery. For each creature your opponents control, put a 4/4 green beast creature token onto the battlefield. Each of those beasts fights a different one of those creatures. So this is the best mono green board wipe in the game, FYI, but it's also great in this deck because it makes creature tokens. Next is Hour of Revelation, 3 and 3 white for a sorcery, but it costs 3 less to cast if there are 10 or more non-land permanents on the battlefield, and you destroy all non-land permanents. Yes, this is going to destroy your stuff too, but sometimes that's just what you need to do in order to survive. Next is Makindi Stampede, 3 and 2 white for a sorcery. Creatures you control get +2/+2 until the end of the turn, so in the right situation that can win you the game, or you can choose to have this enter the battlefield as a tapped land. Next we have Balaget Recovery, 2 and a green for a sorcery. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand, or you can choose to have this enter the battlefield as a tapped land. And then we have the lands. There's only a couple of lands worth mentioning. We have Oran Reef, the Vast Wood, which enters tapped. It taps for a green, or you can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on each green creature that entered the battlefield this turn. That can pump up a lot of your creatures. And then we have Field of the Dead, which enters tapped. It taps for a colorless, and whenever it or another land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands with different names, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So even though we're not playing black, we are allowed to have this in the deck, and this is just one of the best ways to make creature tokens in the whole game, because it's on a land, and all you need to do is just have a bunch of lands with different names, and you're just getting free 2/2s basically every single turn. And that is it. We have 35 lands in total, and that is my Kamahl and Akroma creature tokens deck. So let me know what you think in the comments, and if you like this video, hey, please hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. This is Eric from Bane Alley Magic signing off. Until next time, take care, take it easy.